the agenda setter.
Hello and welcome to your daily current affairs analysis for December 19th, 2025. Today we're going to break down the most important news stories and really connect the dots for your UPSC preparation. So let's start with a big picture question to frame everything we're about to discuss. How do a nation's internal debates, the arguments we have about our own laws and policies, actually shape how the world sees us? Keep this in the back of your mind today because you're going to see just how deeply connected domestic governance and foreign policy really are.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll dive into the health of our core democratic institutions. Then, we'll see what kind of new policies and debates are popping up. After that, we'll pivot to the economy. And finally, we'll zoom out to see how all this plays out for India on the world stage. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with how to use this for your exams.
Okay, let's get right into our first section. We're putting two of the most important pillars of our democracy under the microscope, the Parliament and our federal structure. In an ideal world, Parliament is the place for deep, thoughtful debate and scrutiny of laws. But the recent winter session has raised some serious concerns. We've seen a lot of disruptions and, more importantly, major bills being passed with what many feel is very limited discussion. That's a pretty stark contrast to its intended purpose, wouldn't you say?
Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The session had fewer sittings than it was supposed to. Plus, we're seeing a trend where fewer bills are sent to parliamentary committees for that detailed line-by-line check. And when you combine that with rushed debates, what happens? It weakens the legislature's ability to hold the executive accountable. This isn't just about procedure. It's about the quality of the laws that govern us all.
And it's not just about Parliament. The Supreme Court has also been talking about another core pillar, federalism. This quote right here is so powerful. The court is basically sending a clear message about the importance of cooperative federalism. It's a reminder that a strong India needs a healthy balance of power, not just between the judiciary and the legislature, but between the center and the state.
So how do these big institutional issues actually affect real-world policy? Well, that brings us to our next section, where we'll look at some major new reforms in rural employment and national security. Now, this table shows a really fundamental shift in our approach to rural employment. The new VBG-RAM-G-Bill is looking to replace the long-standing MGNREGA. But look at the key difference in its legal status. We're moving from a demand-driven legal entitlement, meaning you had a right to the work, to a budget-capped allocation. And this one change has kicked off a massive debate about the very idea of a legal right to work. Now, 125 days of work. That sounds like an improvement over 100, right? But here's the catch. The key phrase is up to. Under MGNREGA, those 100 days were a legal guarantee. Under the new bill, 125 is the maximum possible, all depending on the budget. It's not a guarantee anymore. That's a crucial distinction.
Shifting gears to national security for a moment, the government has announced something new, the Bureau of Port Security, or BOPS. This is a pretty big deal. It's going to be a statutory body, meaning it'll have real legal authority, and it will be in charge of security for all our major ports. The CISF, the Central Industrial Security Force, is going to be the main agency doing the security assessment.
Okay, let's switch over and talk about the economy. The big story here is all about reform. We're seeing major changes aimed at making our financial markets simpler, more efficient, and importantly, safer for investors.
So there's this new securities market code bill, and its main goal is just to clean things up. The plan is basically threefold. First, take three huge, complicated financial laws and merge them into one single code. Makes sense, right? Second, streamline all the rules and regulations. And third, and this is really interesting, decriminalize minor mistakes. The idea is to focus on the serious fraud and make it easier for honest businesses to comply.
Meanwhile, CB is also making some moves to protect mutual fund investors. One key change is separating government taxes and levies from the total expense ratio, or TER. So what does that mean for you? It means you'll have a much clearer idea of exactly what you're paying in fees. They're also getting rid of incentives tied to exit loads, which is another great move to make sure financial advice is truly in your best interest.
All right, we've covered what's happening inside the country. Now let's zoom out and take a look at how India is positioning itself on the global stage, especially when it comes to climate change, trade, and our strategic partnerships.
In any global climate change negotiation, you'll hear India consistently talk about one core principle, common but differentiated responsibilities, or CBDR.
The idea is actually pretty simple. Yes, every country has a responsibility to fight climate change, but India argues the developed nations that have been industrializing and polluting for over a century have a greater responsibility, and that includes helping developing nations with money and technology for their green transition. Now for some fantastic news on the trade front. India and Oman have just signed a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. This is a huge win. It gives Indian exports almost total duty-free access to Oman's market. And crucially, it's not just about goods. It covers services and investment, which are areas where India's economy can really shine. And to show just how deep and important this relationship is becoming, the Prime Minister was also awarded Oman's highest civilian honor. Now, this isn't just a symbolic gesture. It's a powerful signal that our strategic maritime partnership in the super important Western Indian Ocean is stronger than ever. And beyond the Gulf, India's neighborhood first policy continues to be a top priority, with a lot of outreach to ensure regional stability. On the defense side of things, we're seeing important joint exercises like Avia Indra with Russia and Desert Cyclone with the UAE. These are all about building trust and making sure our militaries can work together effectively. Okay, let's bring it all home. In this final section, we're going to tie everything we've talked about together and focus specifically on how you can use this information for your prelims and mains. So here are 5 high-value themes from today's news that you can directly plug into your studies. First, the stress on democratic institutions like Parliament. That's classic General Studies Paper 2 material. Same goes for federalism. The big economic reforms we discussed, that's your GS3. Our diplomacy in the neighborhood and the maritime space is back to GS2. And finally, climate equity and technology fall squarely under GS3. This is exactly how you should be connecting the daily news to your syllabus. Which brings us right back to that question we started with. But now we have a lot more to think about. As India's global ambitions get bigger and bigger, the real question is, are our domestic institutions, our parliament, our federalism, our regulators, keeping up? Are they strong enough to support that ambition? That is a critical question to chew on for your mains answers and definitely for your interview. Thanks for joining this explainer.